Hi, Joshua.
Hello.
Hi. Were you in here earlier and then nobody showed up, so you thought it wasn't happening?
No, I just been in here for
Oh,
almost 10 minutes.
okay. Yeah, I was running late. I'm sorry about that.
That's fine.
It looks like it's just gonna be you and I though. So that's cool. Um, that means we get to more have like a one-on-one training session and
Yeah.
um, all right. Let me get focused here. Log into FutureFeed, share my screen. How long have you been using FutureFeed for?
Let's say a few weeks.
Okay.
I was at the conference in Wichita. Um, so we got to play around with a little bit there. We already had our stuff, I wouldn't say set up, but we had a lot of things entered into
Mm-hmm.
our company information and things like that. And uh, mostly been struggling with getting all of the non-IT personnel really moving in this, getting things
Yeah.
getting things going.
Okay. Yeah, I was supposed to go to that Wichita and then I missed my flight. So, but I heard it was good.
It's all right.
So this is service provider training session number 1. So, what I typically do is I'm just gonna go through half of the tool. We have 2 training sessions. This is the first one. You'll have to sign up for the second one when you feel like you're ready. So today I talk about getting started with the tool. I mention a couple things that are available to service providers to help you guys with managing like multiple client packages. And I'm going to make it all the way to the document section of the tool. And then in the second session, we talk about conducting assessments and documenting them, your system security plan, and your poem. So
Yeah.
um, feel free to stop me at any point. So a couple things I want to show you as a service provider. I'm sure you're going to be managing potentially at least more than one multiple compliance packages.
Mhm.
And I refer to mm, an assessment scope as a compliance package or a compliance boundary. So here I am showing you, I have access to these 6 environments. Each one of them is its own boundary or compliance package.
Mhm.
So you would, when you log in, whatever clients you have access to, you would see them here. Um, the first thing I want to show you that is an add-on that we have available to the service providers. It's related to it's called a document library. And the
Mhm.
best way I could show you what that looks like is if I go over here and I show you what right now we have a FutureFeed templates
Mhm.
document library. So here there's 15, wow, 55 um, FutureFeed templates that are available to all FutureFeed users.
Mhm.
So we at you as service providers have the ability to create your own documents library. And this is for the service providers that have their own templates that they'd like to use. Okay. So I just wanted to point that out. If you guys have your own document templates that you like to use for all of your clients and you don't want to leverage what FutureFeed has, or here we also have another company that sells their documentation toolkit in here, then you would want or you may want to look into creating your own document library because then it would be accessible just like how I got here, except there'd be a third row and it'd be your companies and all of your clients could go and access and use any one of your company's templates.
Okay.
Um, so that's the first. service provider add-on that we have. The second one is called our um, cloning template. So what that is it would be an environment like any one of these where you build it out and you put all of the information into it that you would want every one of your clients to have as soon as their environment is stood up. So
Hmm.
essentially you'd clone that environment, rename it to your client's environment or your client, the client's company name. And then when they log into FutureFeed, they're looking at a FutureFeed environment that's got some information in it that you want them to have. So I'm not, privy on your company and the services you're doing, but for example, if you're doing like vulnerability scanning for all of your clients, then you may want to have in the vulnerability scan security control requirement, you may want to have a description in here that talks about your vulnerability scanning, or you'd mark it partially inherited or fully inherited. Um, and you'd have evidence preloaded into the environment. All this stuff that you'd want all of your clients to have access to. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's called the template environment or cloning environment. Um, all right. So the very first thing you're going to want your clients to do is when they get access to future. Well, let me ask you this. Are you using Future Feed for your company as well? Like, are you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently, I mean, I'm in this mainly because I can't learn too much, but the company that I'm working for doesn't have any plans of offering this as a service, but I'm getting my CCP,
Oh, cool.
so I may be able to get work on the side helping more people get ready for assessments or performing assessments doesn't make much difference to me. Just I expect that once this company has their CMMC stuff running better, they may decide that they don't need, 40 hours a week worth of my time and
Uh,
fill up, plan
okay.
for the future.
Yeah. Cool, cool. Well, good luck on that. Um, mm, it's definitely a good time to get in the business, right?
Mhm.
Um, all right. So then I'll kind of just talk about like so you're setting this, you're completing this for the company you're working with, and you may use it for other clients.
Mhm.
So the first thing you're going to want to do is start with the start. It's labeled as such because that's the first thing you want to fill out. And how the user interface was designed is that you would start over here and you're working left to right. So after you're done with start, you go on to people, tools, documents, and all the way to the right. Um, so I'm going to just skim through some of these areas in here and highlight some tips and tricks.
Yeah.
Okay. So nothing too fancy here. Corporate data, drop in the company logo that then it shows up in the system security plan report that you can export. Um, Company information, date, all that, pretty self-explanatory. Down here, what is your risk appetite? So this is your company's kind of risk tolerance, how they handle risk, and at what threshold do they need to start focusing on some risks. And it comes into play with when you start working in the system POAM, okay? And you try to and you're prioritizing remediation efforts. Well, you would want to remediate those items that pose a greater risk to your company. So here is your setting the risk appetite for your company so people can always refer back to that. And then you would help your clients also determine and set their risk appetite. Throughout FutureFeed, we have little green dots to help you with, some more information about that area. And then I also want to point up here in the getting started, we have um, some more information to read through, some tips and tricks. And it talks about like what information we're capturing, why we're capturing it, how that information should be used, and how it's going to be looked at during an assessment. So every page has the getting started guide, and it's the information that you see in there is specific to the page you're on. It's kind of like a user manual.
Yeah.
Um, Company description, not too much to cover here other than you just document your company size. Do you have an IT budget or a cybersecurity budget? Um, and then does your company have cybersecurity insurance? If it does, what does it cover? Expiration dates, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Location. So here's an important area because this is when this is where you're going to first start defining your assessment scope or your compliance boundary. Okay. Um, I recommend you log all locations for your company. So in this sample environment, it looks like there's 4 locations, okay? Let's say that only 2 of those locations have CY data though. So what I would do is log all locations that your company manages, owns, utilizes, operates out of. And then after you log them, go into them, click into them, and then fill out the data. And then in here is where you're going to define what locations are in scope and what locations are out of scope. To do that, you would go over to the compliance tab. And for this location, is it storing, processing, or transmitting FCI here? Yes or no? Um, is it storing, processing, or transmitting CUI? And if you click, that it does have any of the CUI data types in that location, then obviously that's indicating that that location is in scope of the requirements. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, there's CUI here, and yeah, there's FCI at this location. Um, Now why I said you should log them all is because for the locations that are not in scope, you still want to show an assessor that you did that analysis and you did consider that location. You know, you're aware that there's another location, and we did have that discussion that no, there's no CUI business going on there. So I would log it in FutureFeed, and then under the descriptions area, um, define, your reason for saying it's out of scope, essentially.
Mhm.
Okay. And the same thing with technology. So I'm going to kind of jump up here to the tools area. Um, some people some clients only like to put what they know as being in scope of the requirements into FutureFeed, which you can do. I mean, at the very least, you want to make sure you have an entry for everything that's in scope.
Mhm.
I would, just from my experience doing all this, and I'm a lead CCA, and CCP as well, so I've done assessments. Um, when they go in, either your company or your clients go into that assessment, the very first meeting that's going to happen is the pre-assessment, preliminary assessment meetings, and where they're going to talk to you guys about your assessment scope. The assessors, they want to understand your assessment scope, what is going to be evaluated. And part of that discussion is also, well, what did you say was out of scope? And then why did you say it's out of scope? Um, and so for in the technology area, the same thing with the locations, I would list everything, all the technology, all the systems, all the applications, being used by your company. And then after you list them out, you would click into them, go to that compliance area, and then here under the technology, it's documented a little bit different, but then you'd categorize it. So
Okay.
is it in scope, which would mean it's one of these top 4, or is it out of scope? And then if you mark something out of scope, again, I'd go over here under descriptions and say why you said it's out of scope. And you might even need to upload some evidence. Um, because anything that you say is out of scope, it needs to be physically or logically separated from what's in scope. So when it comes to technology, typically an assessor is going to want to see that, um, want to understand why you said something's out of scope, and then want some evidence or proof that there's some logical separation, like some VLAN or segments or access control lists, or, what's preventing those two assets from touching each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so back to locations, I would recommend logging all locations and then further defining which locations are in scope and which ones are out of scope. And then for anything that you say out of scope, just provide that rationale. So when, sometimes people implement the requirements and they're not going to go through an assessment for like a year and a half, 2 years from now. And they're going to need some refresher on, okay, what did we say was in scope and what did we say was out of scope and why did we say it's out of scope? So documenting all that analysis in FutureFeed is just going to help run that assessment more smoothly. Um, all right, maintenance and ownership. So here at a high level, you're just kind of talking about the hardware that is utilized by the company and the software, who maintains it, who owns it. To get an idea of how I'd write it up, just refer to the getting started area. Um, I have a little example here on how I would write it up. Um, so scope, here's where you start defining your system. Give the system a name, a unique identifier. Uh, what is the system type? Is it an enterprise-wide implementation? That means your company has decided to implement the NIST 171 requirements everywhere. You didn't decide things were out of scope. You didn't reduce that compliance boundary for the purpose of cost and maintenance effort. Organizational unit, if your company has a bunch of departments and only one department's doing DIB contractor work, so only that department and its assets and its locations have been designed to implement the requirements, or an enclave. So that's when, you have a whole network, but then you just create one segment of the network that meets the requirement. Um, okay, and I did define that up here. Okay. I just recently added these getting started guides, so I'm still kind of working on improving them. And every time I think of something else to say, I'm like, yeah, I should add that. Um, so, you'd start describing the system boundary and the purpose of the system here. Pretty self-explanatory. So then over in contracts, this is where you start documenting the contracts your company or your clients are holding, and this isn't filled out, but you could see the information that gets captured, the contract title, description of the contract, the cage code associated with that contract, and then the different clauses that are present in that contract that are driving the need for a level 1 or a level 2. Um, so this is a great area, because if you're working with a client that really doesn't know what their assessment scope should be, that whole discussion about scoping and defining what needs to meet the requirements versus what doesn't. It all starts with the contract and where's that work being done and where's that information being shared or stored or processed. And so having your clients define this is going to help you with that conversation, if you need to have that conversation with them. They may already know what their environment is supposed to look like. Cage code, as I'm sure you're aware, your system security plan needs to be associated with at least one cage code. You can have multiple cage codes associated with an SSP. You just document those here. Data inventory. Okay, so after your clients define those contracts they have, then they go on to define the data types that are being introduced into their environment because of that contract. So does that contract only introduce FCI? Is this only an FCI boundary, a level 1 boundary? Or does that contract also introduce CUI into your environment? So here in the FCI area, it's pretty simple. You just define the tools, the technology that store, process, or transmit FCI by clicking on or off. Okay. Now this is going to be blank. You're not going to have any tools listed here. You do have to go up here under the tools and enter them first.
Yeah.
And then you'll have to come back to this area and mark which ones that do. And then CUI is you're defining, of course, yeah, we have CUI, but what kind of CUI do you have? Is it CTI? I mean, typically in the defense, it's in this realm, one of these four things. Is it export controlled? Okay, so it's just checking the box. You're telling the assessor, yeah, I have CUI, but specifically I have CUI CTI.
Mhm.
When the wrench shows up, we'll do it for this one here, this DoD critical infrastructure security information. Right now it's just checking the box. What you can do is further associate devices with that type of information. And to do that, it gets done in the tools area. So I'll show you here. You would open up that tool, go to that compliance section. Um, it does have to be a CUI asset
Mhm.
in order to see this. It was grayed out. Let me go back to um,
It was out of scope.
yeah. So if it's anything other than a CUI asset, so any of these four, then this CUI icon here, you can't click on it. So if you say something's a CUI asset, then you can click on this, and then you could further say that this asset here, this IT asset, is storing, processing, or transmitting that type of CUI. And when you click it in here, that's when you can go back to that data inventory. And now we see a wrench.
Mhm.
Because now we specifically identified that asset as storing, processing, or transmitting that type of CUI. So you can leave it as just a check mark if you want, but if you want to just a more clear CUI data flow, then if you associate it with a tool, the wrench shows up.
Okay.
We've had some users of FutureFeed who want to be able to track and identify other data types other than FCI and CUI as um, being processed in this environment. And so, like, if they had employee PII or they had a HIPAA contract or whatnot, they could do so in the sensitive data area. Settings, you can integrate FutureFeed with a local ticketing system. You just click enable and then put that email address. So where you see this capability or this functionality is within your POAM, okay? You can do POAM actions or POAM projects. So right now I have it enabled, and if I go up to my system POAM, down here, the envelope, now I can send an email from FutureFeed to that ticketing system here, maybe add additional notes about the POAM, and then hit send, and it sends that email. Of course, if it's not enabled, then then that envelope icon is grayed out. Okay. Trick or a tip here is that it doesn't know what a ticket system email address is. I could put my own in there.
Mhm.
So some of the smaller clients that use FutureFeed, they don't have ticket systems in their environment. And so they'll create like a email distro or a shared inbox and put
Mhm.
that email in here. So that way maybe they have some compliance management team members who want to get updates about POAM items. So they can still send those emails out from FutureFeed, but you can put any email in there. Due date. So there's a couple of things that trigger a POAM entry to be created in FutureFeed. A big one is if you mark an objective as not met, FutureFeed's going to create that first POAM. It automatically creates a POAM entry as soon as you say something's not met or failed.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a due date in there. So here's what is that due date? When you make that POAM, how many quarters out do you want it to be, that due date? This area is very specific. Well, it's helpful for everyone, but the people who find the most help in this is for our service providers. And that's because they just are working with multiple clients and it's kind of hard to, keep them straight sometimes. So what you're doing here is um, can you hear that lawnmower? Is that annoying you?
No, I can't hear.
Okay. I just realized my back door was open and someone's out there mowing the lawn. This is standardizing the language for your company or your clients. And again, it's going to come into play with POAM remediation. So when you create POAMs, here I'll jump there quick. Here's a POAM for this 311 control. When you create the POAM, there's a place for you to identify, what's the impact of that item to your compliance efforts, how much effort is it going to take to get that implemented, and is there any cost associated with getting this requirement implemented? And so you set them here, but you define what this means to people in that other area. So it's kind of like when you go to the doctor's office and you're like, hey, I don't feel good, I'm in pain. And then they're like, well, tell me what level of pain you're in. And on the chart in the wall, they have like a chart with a bunch of emoji faces on it, It's standardizing the language of what impact, effort, and cost means for that client. And when you set it here, then you can refer back to it up in this top right corner, the ruler. So you can always refer to what impact, effort, and cost means to that client. Like if you're working with a big client, low cost may be like $5,000. But if you're working with a small client, a low cost may be $500. Okay.
Mhm.
So you can see why our service providers like this, because then they can keep all of their clients straight. Framework here, you can disable, I'm sure you notice when you log into FutureFeed, there's a FedRAMP warning banner that pops up. You can disable that if you're an admin. We do have some clients that, I'm sorry, that's bugging me now. I don't know if you can hear. I'll be right back. I'm gonna shut that door.
Okay.
Okay. Just some people don't have a FedRAMP requirement to use a tool like FutureFeed, and so they don't need to see that FedRAMP warning, so people can disable it.
What's the distinction there between the different clients? Who needs it and who doesn't?
Um, right now, I would say, well, let me start by saying that FutureFeed itself, the software, is not currently FedRAMP moderate equivalent.
Mhm.
We're hosted in Azure Gov, which is, or is it AWS Gov? We're hosted in a cloud environment that is FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high authorized. So the hosting platform, the infrastructure meets FedRAMP. Our tool, the software as a service, does not yet. We are actively working on implementing the 853 controls, and we're hoping to be assessed in the next 2 to 3 months. So at this point in time, no users of FutureFeed should put CUI data into FutureFeed because it's not a FedRAMP moderate authorized or equivalent tool. Other than that, I'm not sure which clients, what regulations they may have that make them have to use a tool like this or not. That's FedRAMP. So yes, that's something to know. Don't put CUI and don't have your clients put CUI data in here until we get that FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And then we would be authorized to store, process, or transmit CUI.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all the fields in the start area. So
Mhm.
that's, you'd fill that out. And I'm sure you noticed like a lot of this information, like the company information and the system information, this is all building out that top portion of your system security plan.
Mhm.
After you're done with start, then you start working on creating accounts in FutureFeed. You have to be an administrator to add new users. We have currently, there's a standard role. Anybody who has standard access, they have access to all areas of FutureFeed. Admins, they have access to all areas of FutureFeed, and they can make accounts, and they can disable the FedRAMP warning, and they can do some subscription related stuff.
Mhm.
The assessor role is a read-only access, and when they log in, anybody with the assessor role, when they log in, they only can view the SSP area, and they get to view this dashboard here for like a high level overview of the compliance status. And that's it. That's all the role-based access we have: standard, admin, and assessor. We are working on a more like robust role-based or discretionary-based access control method. Right now, it's just these 3 roles.
Yeah.
What no access is in FutureFeed, you can very clearly identify and track responsibility all throughout the platform. We use the RACI model, RACI. I'm sure you saw that.
Mhm.
Okay, so here's just the RACI model under a control. So you can associate individuals or teams as being responsible, accountable, consultant, or informed. And some people want to very clearly tag and identify someone as being responsible for something, but that person doesn't necessarily need access to FutureFeed. But you
Mhm.
still want to call them out by name. And so
Yeah.
that's what the no access is. You would create as you essentially you're just logging them as a employee or a user, but they don't have access to FutureFeed. I would consider though, if you end up assigning responsibility a lot to an individual, I would just consider giving them access to FutureFeed, standard access to FutureFeed, because over here under the dashboard, when someone gets assigned some responsibility, I can see that assignment. So I get to see what controls I'm responsible for, what technology I'm responsible for, what documentation. Up here, I can see what tasks have been assigned to me and what POEM items have been assigned to me. And so to really use that, if you're assigning someone responsibility, instead of having to like then log out a FutureFeed and send them an email and, hey, you've been tagged as responsible for this POEM item, close it out. Instead of having to do all that communication outside of FutureFeed, if you just create an account to FutureFeed, then they can log into here and see what they have assigned to them, and then they can click on it and work on it. Also up here in the user settings, there's under my preferences, email notifications. So whenever I get a new assignment, I'll get an email. Or whenever I have something that's due or overdue, I'll get an email. So also another reason why you may want to consider making them an account is so that way they get those notifications and you don't have to do all that additional communication.
Where did you say the preferences were? I didn't see. Oh, okay. I've been
Up
using.
there under user settings. Yep. Um, all right. Yeah, because the tasks, specifically the tasks are, in my opinion, they're very powerful. Almost as powerful as the SSP and POAM capability. Um, I'll show you what that looks like quick. So if I go under, I'm going to go under this vulnerability scanning procedure item. It's a document that I created. And I click at all of the documents have these layouts. If I go under task assignments, it looks like someone's already done this, but this is where you create tasks. So if you have a requirement to run a weekly vulnerability scan, you would create a task, you'd assign it to the person who's responsible to do that. You'd make it repeat because you need it to be done every week, and you'd hit submit. And now that person, if they have access to FutureFeed, they're going to get that notification that they got a new task. And then every week when that task is triggered, they'll get that notification. So that's just another reason why I would say, like, if you're giving someone responsibility
Hmm.
with any of the control requirements, a POAM, security documentation, or they're responsible for managing any of the assets, then I would just create them account in FutureFeed. It's going to eliminate the amount of external communication you have to do. So back to people, manage user. Here's where you create all the accounts. After you create accounts, then you're going to want to start creating roles, security roles. Think of all the roles that are involved with POAMs and the security control requirements and the technology and the locations. So you create a role for like facility security manager, IT department. You can see here. These ones are default. These ones will show up in your system security plan. So you can choose to use them. If you don't use them, you can just mark them as not applicable. And then create any additional roles by just clicking new role. So now a tip here is that I talked about like assigning people as responsible. It's best if you assign people responsibility either by a role or a team,
Hmm.
because then that assignment of RACI responsibility, it stays tied to the role in the team. So if here we have Larry as our incident team lead, if Larry leaves the company, all I got to do is come in here and change who's assumed that role. And now when Cynthia logs in, she's going to see everything that Larry was working on because I associated all that responsibility with the role. Versus if I tagged Larry in a bunch of stuff, I got to go in and manually reassign those tasks to someone else.
Hmm.
Same thing with the teams over here. You build out your compliance related teams, and then anybody who's part of that team is going to see the responsibilities assigned to that team. And it's as simple as just removing people from the team and adding in new people. You can even assign a team leader. So do try to, wherever you see RACI assignment, try to associate it with a role or a team. So that way, when you have personnel changes, you don't have to go and try to reassign all that activity.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, the example in the RACI, you can actually only assign to a role.
in a few areas, they do restrict, I think in the accountable.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was saying. In the accountable part
Yeah.
of the RACI.
Yeah. Um, so roles, let me go back here. So what's the default accountable role? You're going to want to set this. Remember how I said like there's several things that trigger a poem to be created?
Hmm.
Well, if you forget to assign that poem to someone, it will be automatically assigned to this default accountable role.
Okay.
And that's great. You'd want to probably put yourself or someone else who knows about what this means. So that way, when you see that you got assigned something new, that just means that whoever created that item forgot to assign it to the right person. So then you would work with them to get it reassigned to the right person.
Yeah.
And then you don't have a bunch of like action items and poems open that aren't assigned to anyone. That's the default accountable role. Over here, teams, you just build out the teams. Populate, what we did is we read through um, the CMMC documentation. So I'll open up an assessment guide here. So here's the CMMC assessor's guide, and under this control here, 312, under the potential assessment methods, assessors really rely on this.
Hmm.
In the interview section, it says, oh, you should potentially interview your system and network administrator or the system developer. Um, so what we did is we created built-in teams, and for example, you just saw that the system developer was mentioned. Well, that system developer role was mentioned under these 35 controls.
Hmm.
So it's a way to quickly build out teams and also have those teams already tagged as accountable or responsible for these controls.
Hmm.
So you can quickly divvy up the work if especially for the clients who are just starting to get into this world of 171 and CMMC. That's gonna like it's a quicker way to be like, okay, you're a system developer. Well, take a look at all these 35 controls.
Yep.
Um, that's pretty much the people tab. The next thing that you're going to want to do for your company or your clients is you want them to start listing out the technology. Again, I would recommend listing out everything because you can also, in a way, use FutureFeed as a, like an IT asset management tool. So you don't just have to list out what you know needs to meet the CMMC requirements.
Hmm.
List out everything and then go into them. And with that categorization, mark what's in scope and what's out of scope. Um, to add items, you just hit the plus button. Um, what is this tool doing for you? And then is it local, in the cloud, or is it managed by, provided by and managed by an external service provider? Hit plus. So you just quickly type them up here and then go find them, open them up, and fill out all the fields that you can.
Hmm.
Um, let's say that this tool was managed by an external service provider. Then down here under the CRM is where you associate that external service provider's shared responsibility matrix. Um, so you'd click on it and associate the technology with the shared responsibility agreement. Now, here is nothing will be listed here. You first have to create the entries. So if you go into your documents under reference docs, there's a category of documents called CRMs. So whenever you have some external service providers involved, you'll ask them for their CRM or their SRM or their SLA, whatever they want to call it. You'd create a new entry, name it. Let's say you have like Summit 7. They're a reseller of Microsoft GCC High. Okay. So hit it, create an entry for them. Again, go in there then and upload attach that documentation that they should be providing you.
Mhm.
So that you'd have to make an entry like this for the CRM. And then when you do that, you can associate your technology to it. So if this Entra ID is in my GCC High environment, um, and Summit 7's managing it for me, then that's how you make that association. Okay.
Yep.
Um, so log the technology, fill out the data, get responsibility assigned, and then an important step is to connect it. So
Mhm.
here you're associating your, essentially think of it as like you're associating your evidence with the requirements. So
Mhm.
what requirements are essentially requiring you to have identification and authentication implemented? Um, you can search by keyword or, um, numbers, but you'd associate it with the correct controls. You can, you know, and at this point in time, you don't have to worry about like if you're unsure if you should associate a control or not, I would just go ahead and connect it.
Yeah, because
Because,
you can remove it from that control still.
yeah, because when you go into the assessment and you're doing like an internal assessment, audit, or some sort of gap assessment, and you look at the control and you start reading about the requirements, you're like, wait, it doesn't make sense. Why is this connected? You just remove it then down here. You'll clean up your connections underneath the control.
Mhm.
So under tools, log the tools, and make those connections is about all I really gotta say here. Make sure you categorize. This is an important part to categorize the assets. And then the tasks, just create tasks for, if you have something that needs to be initially implemented, you would create a task, but then also create tasks that support what needs to happen throughout the year. Under Entra ID, just thinking out loud here, under this Entra ID one, maybe you would want to create a task for like a quarterly access review. Every quarter you go in there and you review all the accounts and you make sure that only the accounts that are needed are active and nobody's left the company and their account forgot to be deleted or whatever. So in the tasks, you make tasks related to like what needs to be done initially to get the requirements to a compliant state, and then create tasks supporting your continuous monitoring activities. Um, any questions with technology?
No.
Okay, so documents is pretty much the same way as you would have your company, or if you're working with a client, you'd have them list out all of their security documentation. I should have pointed this out in the tools, but it's the same layout. Is in both tools and documents, you have an active area. And then if you scroll down, you have a pending area. So what that means is, since I'm under documents, under active, I would log those documents they're already approved, they're fully developed, people are following them, they're in place and being enforced. And then if you're working with clients that like don't have an access control policy or they don't really have much of anything documentation wise, then you would create those entries down here under the pending area. And when you do that, then it creates a poem entry for that document. Same thing with tools. There's active and pending. So these are everything you currently have in production. It's already running. And then what does the company plan to acquire in the future? So here someone made an entry for Nessus vulnerability scanner, painting the picture that at this time they don't have vulnerability scanner, but they are planning to acquire Nessus. And so you can imagine the tasks in here would be associated with like acquiring that and deploying it and setting it up.
Mhm.
Um, So in documents, that's just hit plus, log the document. And then important to open that item back up, fill out all the data, and really important to connect the controls. We have a live document editor, so you can build documents and edit documents and manage documents in FutureFeed. Some people like that. Some people already have some sort of external document management system, SharePoint, whatever have you. And so they just want to upload versions of the document, and they can, that's doable too here. In here, there's a link. So if you wanted to put like a link to your SharePoint where that document is housed, you would do that here. So yeah, a couple different ways. Either attach the document or actually manage the document in FutureFeed, or just provide a link to where that document's housed.
Yeah.
If you accidentally make an entry in the wrong area, like if I made a entry for a document here and it was really it's not active, it's really still in development, you just open up the ticket and it's up here. You
Mm-hmm.
turn it pending, or see how it's going to put this on my poem.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Because we have 3 minutes and I got to jump, but this is where I stop. And then next session, whenever you're ready for the next session, we'll go over the rest of the subway map here.
Yeah, I'm actually in the next user level training.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, what is it? Because I'm probably gonna hear the same stuff.
Well, this should be the FutureFeed training to end
Oh,
user.
yeah, yeah. So we'll talk about assess.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'll see you over there.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye.